Rebuild. Rebuild. The Marlins aren't saying it. The Marlins are not using that term. But the Marlins right now are entering a rebuild. Does that rebuild start with this international free agency class? Time to get into. This is Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. It's your daily Marlins podcast. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, on X at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are involved in Marlins Twitter madness, you know where to be voting. I think your boy is in the final four, baby. Head to head with Danny Alvarez, Alex Trabase's Danny Alvarez. Is he even really a Marlins fan? I don't know. I think he's just a Venezuelan fan. Nevertheless, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen, guys. This is your team every day, even through January and the offseason. But, of course, there is still plenty happening in Marlins world, and we're keeping you right up to date. There is a YouTube channel as well, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe over there, too. That channel is Locked On Marlins on YouTube. Hit subscribe there, and you will enjoy, well, the visuals and the graphics, the rundown. And for those that can't see the rundown, let me just read it out to you out loud. There's 5 bullet points. Let me read them in chronological order, ascending order. Rebuild. 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 Mish spaces and international free agent signings. We're going to talk about Craig Mish's appearance with the Fish on First guys on their spaces last week. Been a bit of a delay talking about this, but equally there were some really interesting nuggets out of that. Spaces and conversation, which was great. Again, all pointing towards, well, the top 3 points. Rebuild. The Marlins aren't using that word, but I am. And the Marlins are, for want of a better description, entering into a rebuild at this point. There's also some news regarding some international free agents. That bonanza started on Monday. The Marlins have made one particularly splashy deal and signing. And then, well, we'll talk about it in more detail, but they've gone pitcher heavy. I trust the Marlins to develop pitchers above any and all for sure. So tons to get into on today's episode, guys. But this episode, but just to let you know, this episode is sponsored by Jase Medical. And you can empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. And use the code Locked On to get $20 off your order. That is Jase Medical and Jase for Jase, jasemedical.com. All right, guys, where to start? Well, considering there's 3 bullet points, saying exactly the same word, we're going to talk about the rebuild. The Marlins, in my opinion anyway, and for PR purposes, they are not using this language, but I'm telling you right now, the Marlins are in a rebuild at this point. Mish on his spaces has effectively alluded to this point. And why are they entering a rebuild? And what have we heard? Here's the main things we've heard this offseason. It is, we need to restock the farm. We need to restock the farm. We need to add more talent to the farm. Ladies and gents, that is propaganda version way of saying we're rebuilding. We are going to sell players from our big league roster, and we're going to add talent to the farm. Ladies and gents, that is called a rebuild. The Marlins are rebuilding. I'm going to keep saying it until we all believe it and we're talking the same language. Firstly, I just want to talk about this situation and this strategy. I'm all for Peter Bendix coming in. I'm all for the Marlins considering maybe a different approach. However, the question that I have and the question as a fan, and listen, I am a fan of the Marlins. I am a fan with a podcast, and I'm here to talk about the Marlins. And I am a fan first and foremost. And listen, off the back of a postseason berth, where pretty much the majority of the talent from last year remains, they've got a few guys coming back from injury. They've lost Hoy Soler, clearly. But the bones of that playoff roster are still around. Yet, we go and start thinking about a rebuild. For me as a fan, that is extremely frustrating. Extremely frustrating. You can sense my anger with this situation. I'm angry. The Marlins right now are in a win now window, to be honest. And they could stretch out into next year, frankly. This window is here. And we're talking about a rebuild 1 year after a playoff appearance. For me, they're not using this language around rebuild. And rightly so, because fans would be angry. Are you angry? Let me know if you're angry about the situation. Because what this points to, and where Craig Mish got to on the spaces anyway, is effectively the Marlins are listening on everyone. Apart from Eury Perez and Sandy Alcantara, which I think is really interesting, the fact that Sandy is on that list. I have had a suspicion that Sandy could be available. He isn't, according to Craig. So that's really interesting to know that Eury and Sandy, untouchables. Apart from that, the Marlins are listening to everyone. Does that sound like a team that's rebuilding to you? It does to me. And what does this mean? Who are the guys that are most likely to be of interest? They're going to be Jesus Luzardo, and they're going to be Luis Arraez. Jesus Luzardo's name was the one that we heard a lot about early on. Now it's turned to Luis Arraez. Everywhere I look on Twitter, every fan base is saying, maybe we can get Luis Arraez. And while we're there, we'll send our middling prospects to the Marlins and see if we can get a deal done. So, again, if the Marlins' plan is to trade Luzardo, who is their de facto ace right now, maybe you'd say Eury Perez is, but Luzardo will, he'll get the ball opening day if he's still around. And then if you want to also trade Luis Arraez, the Marlins are taking a massive step back. They're not prioritizing right now. And to be honest with you, if they go down that path, in many ways, they should just give it the full-blown extravaganza, just hit that button and just explode the whole thing. And just be honest as well. I'd love to just be open and honest about what the plan is here, to be honest. And so I'd love to hear a bit more detail on this. Clearly, no moves have been made. That's the other thing to call out, by the way, is no moves have been made. Luzardo and Arraez have not been traded. No one's been traded yet. So all of this chaos and all of this anger could be unnecessary, which I hope it is. I hope the Marlins just going, actually, yeah, maybe we can still compete this year. They should be thinking that way. Joe Brazzaro has been absolutely banging that drum. It feels like you've got a portion of the guys, the media guys, that are like, I'd say Craig is particularly bought into understanding the strategy, and that maybe there's going to be some short-term pain associated with that where you're missing Sandy and you trade Luzardo and Arraez, you're maybe not going to be over-competitive, but there's a long-term strategy that you're aiming towards, which is effectively the Rays model. The problem is with that is I'm all for the here and now, to be honest. Marlins fans, we've already been through a full-blown rebuild since I started as a fan, and rebuild upon rebuild upon rebuild. Like, can we not just add to this roster? Can we not just stay competitive for more than one season? Is that too much to ask? It feels like it is. And I get the plan. I get the strategy. You want to be like the Rays. It makes sense. But the pathway to being the Rays is like, it's a 3 to 5 year plan. 3 to 5 years. They're asking the Marlins fan base to bear with us. We're going to move the guys that you absolutely love, and we're going to add some prospects that may or may not deliver in the future. Okay. History tells us, based on the Rays, that they have a unique ability about creating these waves and waves of talent. But I do wonder, all of a sudden, Peter Bendix, when the buck stops with you, where it didn't previously, there's other people in the organization, but the buck stops with him, does that change the dynamic? Do you make rash decisions? Do you feel the pressure? We're going to see if Peter Bendix can handle the pressure. I know he's been in a relatively pressurized situation at the Rays and has built that up in some ways from the ground up, but he's risen through the ranks with the Rays. Right now, he's got to rebuild the whole thing. And for me, that is a ton of pressure. Ton of pressure. And in those circumstances, those trading conditions, I don't mean trading conditions specifically in terms of trades, but the conditions you operate within, this is a different set of circumstances. And pressure, we'll wait to see if Peter Bendix can handle it. The Marlins are rebuilding. That's what they're telling us at this point. That's what the media are telling us anyway. So we're going to carry on this conversation, talk about some of the other major nuggets that came out from the Craig Mish Spaces appearance with the Fish on First guys. Before we do that, though, it's time for not just one, but 2 ads. Yes, sir. It is 2 ad season. Must be that time of the year, guys. And let you know, firstly, about our good friends over at Jase Medical. Yes, sir. And I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we just talk for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary stuff. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than, well, if I or one of my kids got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections. That word is so tough to say. Sinusitis, skin infections, among others. Respiratory. There you go. This stuff could happen to any of us. And you can visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician. And your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Sounds unbelievable. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. And without further ado, this episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at eBay Motors. Yes, sir. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, guys, welcome back to Thursday, the 16th of Jan, with me, Peter Pratt, on Locked On Marlins. Thanks for your company. We're talking rebuilds today, guys. We're talking Craig Mish Spaces. We've already talked about Luis Arraez and Jesus Luzardo, the fact that the Marlins are listening to offers on everyone apart from Eury and Sandy. Let's now talk specifically about Luis Arraez. In advance of the arbitration deadline, was thinking about, I wonder if the Marlins and Luis Arraez could actually look at a multi-year extension. What could that look like? Well, what it looks like is it's not going to happen. Not only do the Marlins and Luis Arraez appear pretty far apart in terms of their valuation, significantly apart. Luis Arraez seeking $12 million in 2024, but Craig Mish reporting that he believes Luis Arraez will not be extended by the Marlins at any point. Not this offseason or next offseason or anywhere in between. Craig Mish is expecting Luis Arraez to be traded. Yes, he's expecting Luis Arraez to be traded in one of the offseason windows, either this one or next. Guys, tell me what that sounds like. It sounds like a rebuild to me. The Marlins are rebuilding. They are. That's what it's telling us. You cannot acquire Luis Arraez for Pablo Lopez. He wins the batting title. And then you reasonably say, we need to trade this guy to restock the farm. That's not what teams that want to win do. It may be what teams that want to be sustainable do. But that isn't what a fan base wants either. This is a tough sell to the fans. And that's why the Marlins and the media aren't talking about it as a rebuild, because it's a tough PR sell that the Marlins are doing it again. But they are. They are going into another rebuild. What else did we talk about or what else did Craig talk about on the Spaces? He also talked about the fact that, one interesting thing that was talked about was Jorge Soler. A lot of people were asking about Soler. Were the Marlins in on Soler? Could they have found a way? Craig then asked a question which I think alluded to maybe the situation here, because I was seriously confused about why the Marlins didn't extend a qualifying offer to Jorge Soler. He then asked the question to the people that were asking the question was, hey guys, tell me the timeline. What happened first? Did Bell opt in or did Soler opt out? And it's trying to work that time. So that question to me is saying that were the two connected? Bell opted in, and because Bell opts in, the Marlins then absolutely take a step back, all the way back from Jorge Soler, not even extending a qualifying offer because they were scared he'd accept it and blow the budget. The Marlins have got a budget problem. They've got a budget problem, and they're looking to rebuild. But with Soler, once Bell opted in, Soler became a no-go. Let's talk about shortstop, because that is, the premium position that is up for grabs at this stage. So, in terms of shortstop more generally, Craig believes that through either Lardo or Arraez, combination of the two, I don't know, but a major trade that will happen will likely, the Marlins will be targeting a big league ready, potentially, shortstop. I've talked about it on this pod. That feels like an obvious situation. You're going to trade a stud, and listen, Arraez and Lardo, studs. So you're absolutely targeting a guy that can be your future all-star level shortstop with 6 years of control. That's what the Marlins are seeking in that kind of deal. Way to see how close, firstly, if a trade happens, and secondly, how close the guy is to being big league ready. I think that's really interesting. Let's talk about this season, because he did talk about that too. What his expectations are. The expectations from Craig, it feels like, are Vidal Brujan and Xavier Edwards, probably more Vidal Brujan, will be your shortstop. And considering what the Marlins had to, in the end, give the Rays to acquire Brujan, I think that's been pretty obvious sometime. Brujan, he's got no minor league options. There's no roster flexibility. They've traded for him, I believe, to play shortstop. And I think that's what's going to happen. The other interesting thing here is linked to Jon Berti, because Jon Berti spent some time at shortstop too, and he's the ultimate util guy. The interesting part here too is maybe the sense that Berti's going to spend a decent chunk of time over at third base. And there's maybe like a lack of confidence in some ways with Jake Burger at third. Maybe he's fine, but he's not elite. Do you upgrade defensively there with Jon Berti at third? And maybe you use Jake Burger more so at the DH spot, maybe even first base. So I think that's one to watch for sure. I personally, like the eye test said to me that Jake Burger was completely fine at third. Jon Berti is probably better at third, probably slightly more athletic and mobile, clearly, but Burger to me looked fine. And so I've got no qualms with Burger being there at all, to be honest with you. But we'll see. But that's something that Craig was alluding to. He feels like one of the pitchers is going to be moved this offseason for sure. There's a few names that could be. It could be any of them. They're listing on everyone apart from Eury and Sandy. And so what that means is we're talking about Lardo, which makes sense because he's one of the most expensive non-Sandy. You've got Lardo. You've got Eddie Cabrera. Although with Eddie Cabrera and Trevor Rogers, there's a sense that there's like a sell low situation that would occur there because Eddie had some issues, Trevor injured. So could it be Braxton? Probably not, because Braxy at this point, Braxy's league minimum. Like, I look at it and think, when the Marlins are talking about trading a pitcher, there's only one name. And that name is Jesus Luzardo, because his cost, his quality in the return you can get back because they're seeking an all-star level caliber shortstop for the future. And the fact that the other guys are all effectively on league minimum. The business model is league minimum guys, and when they reach ARB2 and beyond, they're moved. That's the business model, and we know the business model. We know what they're trying to do. So it feels to me like Jesus Luzardo is almost certainly going to be moved this offseason. I'm piecing things together here. Craig is saying one of the pitchers is going to go. Luzardo is the best available and the most expensive. It has to be Jesus Luzardo, does it not? You can't trade Eddie Cabrera on a sell low situation on league minimum. Could you sell high on Brax on league minimum? Maybe. But again, ding, 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 the business model says league minimum, they stay. The guys not on league minimum, they go. So I'm piecing things together here. I think Luzardo will be moved. I'm 90% certain that if the Marlins find the right package, and that package is effectively that all-star caliber future shortstop, that's the deal. That is the deal. So let's keep our eyes peeled for that one. A few more nuggets to get into from this Mish Spaces. Plus, we're talking international free agent signings. Yes, the rebuild in some ways has started. It starts now with at least 21 guys being signed by the Marlins. They still have room to maneuver, including one big splashy name, over $1 million committed to one guy. High risk, high reward in this space. But let's do our final ad of the day, and we will cover that shortly. Stick with us for that, of course. But this episode is also brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. And the NFL season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is super easy to use and has so many different ways to bet. It includes live same-game parlays, and you can find bets in the new Explore tab. And you can also make any parlay your parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Almost botched it. Almost botched it. Kind of botched it. Nevertheless, welcome back to Locked On Marlins on Tuesday, the 16th of Jan. With me, Peter Pratt. We are talking rebuilds. If you haven't cottoned onto this, I think the Marlins are in a rebuild. And I think this is going to be a tough few years for the fans. I'm angry about it because I feel like the rebuild itself doesn't need to start now. The rebuild hasn't started now, actually. And so this may all be speculation. But in people we trust that are providing us the information, everything points to a rebuild. Joe Frizzaro actively against this situation, thinks the pitching is there, maybe the core is there to make a run. You only have to be in and around 500 and maybe add a piece or two at the back end to get yourself in. If you're in, you're dangerous. If you're out, you're out. No chance. The Marlins don't need to do this yet. Does Jesus Luzardo's value or Luis Arraez's value seriously diminish by at least taking it to the deadline? I don't think so. What it does do is shrink maybe the number of buyers that you have. So that's the reason why you do it off season. But would Jesus Luzardo's value be diminished by him playing half a season with the Marlins now versus trading him, right away? I mean, there's some risks clearly of if Luzardo gets hurt, which is possible. Career innings last year. If he gets hurt, what value is there at that point? Limited. So there's pros and cons. But Joe Frizzaro's thinking is, let's just give it a shot. The core is there. Could you add Dan Vogel back and replace Jorge Soler with a bit of Josh Bell and a bit of Jake Burger? I think you can. The pitching's there. I know Sandy's not around, but Trevor's back. Max Meyer's back. Bender's back. There's guys that, will help this team. This team could be better than last year. Imagine Jazz 150. Jake Burger 150 for the Marlins. Josh Bell 150 for the Marlins. No Wendell, Segura, Stallings. Well, those are the main three. None of them for 150. This team should be 90 wins. What the hell are we doing? What the hell are we doing? But That isn't the direction of travel. The Marlins are rebuilding. And it starts with international free agent signings, guys. And the Marlins made a splash, I would say. They made their biggest splash, spending $1.4 million of their bonus pool cash on 16-year-old Luis Cova, center fielder. And it's fair to say, some of the reporting around him, particularly his speed, is eye-popping. Looks to be potentially one of the fastest guys in the history of any sport, potentially. So very intriguing signing there for the Marlins. When you look up and down their class of signees thus far, a couple of things stand out to me. Two major things. Three. First one, they've made a big splash. We've already talked about. That really hasn't, the investment in terms of bonus pool and the return in terms of production in the future haven't directly correlated for the Marlins, particularly since, the changes in this bonus pool situation. Obviously, Victor Mesa being the most obvious situation, which went sideways, heavily sideways. So we shouldn't expect, because the Marlins have committed $1.4 million to Luis Cova, that he will be a stud. Let's assume he will be, and we hope he will for certain. But overall, this is lottery ticket type of activity, in theory. However, the other thing that stands out, the Marlins have gone pitcher heavy with their signings. That makes a lot of organizational sense. Definitely. There's a heavy cluster of guys from the Dominican. It's very, I would say, Dominican heavy overall. Sprinkling of Venezuelans and one Mexican, I believe, thus far. So, they obviously have their DR site now, their new one. So this makes sense too, why you're getting maybe some of these DR kids committing to the Marlins because of their DR camp, state-of-the-art facilities, et cetera, et cetera. So let's hope that, that campus, the way that they manage and develop talent at that age, is getting guys to want to commit to the Marlins, and hopefully with their development system, they can produce some future quality talent that clearly makes it to the big league level or could be included into future trade packages to, maybe upgrade whatever needed or whatever it may be. So a lot of DR guys. Makes sense. Some Venezuelans. The one thing that else stood out to me, no Bahamian studs. The Marlins have been so active in the past couple of seasons, signing guys from the Bahamas, but this year, no Bahamian studs thus far. Bit of a surprise. No English studs either, but maybe no surprise on that one. But no connections thus far to guys in from the Bahamas. We'll wait to see if that changes. Clearly, the Jazz Chisholm effect recently, maybe a lot of guys have been drawn to the Marlins, maybe geographically, plus culturally, plus obviously with Jazz, the most famous Bahamian baseball player there maybe ever has been with the Marlins. So slight surprise on that one. The only other thing to call out, and you may have seen this on Twitter, there was a great group shot from all of the signees, or pretty much most of the signees on yesterday, all looking sharp in their gear. The reminder, these dudes are like 16, 17, and 18. Like, they're all young bucks, all young studs. But one of them in particular caught my eye. Thankfully, Eli Sussman was on the case. And actually, Fish on First, their coverage of this has been much better than mine, clearly. This is definitely not my wheelhouse in terms of, knowledge. But I'll try my best here. But one thing that stood out to me was that one of the guys in that group shot had unbelievable attire on. It was right out of the P. Pratt wardrobe. No doubt about it. P. Pratt, circa 2005, probably not now in 2024, but 2005. Listen, I would have been going for the pink suit, and that stood out to me. Luckily, Eli was able to confirm it is the catcher. So this is already my favorite prospect. Guys, ink this name into your minds, because this guy has the potential to be an absolute stud, purely based on the fact he rocked up to sign in a pink suit with what I believe to be a champagne-colored roll neck or a turtleneck to our US listeners. For me, that is supreme confidence. And it is a catcher called Almen Tolentino. What a name as well. Almen Tolentino from the Dominican Republic signs with the Marlins for $145,000 as a catcher, 17 years of age. Get that name inked into your minds. The dude is going to be an absolute stud, and you've heard it here first on Locked On Marlins. And that's going to end it for today. Guys, the Marlins are in a rebuild, and their rebuild has started yesterday with 21 new guys added to the organization, the biggest of which was a $1.4 million commit which is a big commit to Luis Cova, a center fielder that could be the fastest man on the planet since Usain Bolt. Who knows? We need to see him running against Bolt for sure. Craig Mish shared a load of nuggets, and what he's indicating is there is a plan. Craig believes in the plan, but this is a mid to long-term plan, in my opinion anyway, if you start moving Lardo, Arraez, et al. The Marlins are going to take a step backwards if they do that, in my opinion, with the big league roster. So the Marlins are rebuilding. Wait to see how it goes. But thanks for joining me on Locked On Marlins on Tuesday, the 16th of Jan. And I'll be back tomorrow, all being well, with Sean Barrett. Look forward to seeing you then.